When I finally said I forgive you, that's when my life began to change. I remember that moment clearly, sitting on the worn couch in my small living room, the afternoon light filtering through the curtains, dust motes dancing in the quiet air. It was the first time in years I truly felt peace settle over me, like a gentle hand on my shoulder. Before that, there had been so much pain betrayals that cut deep, heartbreak that left scars I thought would never fade, losses that felt like pieces of my soul were torn away. For the longest time, I thought forgiveness was impossible, but somehow, choosing to forgive not just others, but myself opened a door I never knew was there, and everything changed. Years before that moment, my life was simpler in many ways, yet tangled in complicated emotions I didn't fully understand. I lived in a cozy townhouse on the outskirts of Seattle, the kind of neighborhood where kids rode their bikes down quiet streets and neighbors waved from porches. I was married to Mark Steady, dependable Mark, who I thought was my partner through everything. We had 2 kids, Emma and Noah, who filled our home with laughter and noise. Most days, my mornings began with the smell of freshly brewed coffee, the sizzle of eggs on the stove, and the sleepy voices of my children asking for breakfast. Mark would kiss me goodbye with a tired smile, heading off to his job at the law firm downtown. Life felt predictable, comfortable, but beneath the surface, cracks were beginning to show. I remember the first time I noticed the change. Mark started coming home later, his smiles a little more forced. His phone would light up with messages he quickly hid when I entered the room. There were arguments about nothing and everything all at once, words said too sharply, then regretted. Still, I held on to hope. I told myself maybe he was stressed, maybe we just needed time. But little by little, those small signs piled up until they felt impossible to ignore. One rainy afternoon, I found a text on his phone from someone named L. It was innocent enough at first glance, but the way his face changed when I asked about it told me everything I needed to know. I didn't confront him immediately. Instead, I felt frozen, like a part of me was waiting for the other shoe to drop. After that rainy afternoon, the silence between Mark and me grew heavier. We moved around each other like strangers in our own home, the laughter of Emma and Noah echoing through rooms filled with quiet tension. I began to notice the small things, the scent of a perfume that wasn't mine lingering on his jacket, the way he'd quickly changed the subject when I asked about his day, the missed calls he never mentioned. One evening, as the kids were tucked into bed, I sat on the living room couch, the faint hum of the heater filling the room. Mark was supposed to be working late, but when I peeked into the kitchen, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, hesitated, then silenced it. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I wanted to believe in him, to trust the man I'd built a life with, but doubt was creeping in, uninvited and relentless. I caught myself replaying every moment, every word, searching for signs I'd missed. It was exhausting, this slow unraveling of the life I thought I knew. One afternoon, I confided in my closest friend, Rachel. She looked at me gently, her voice steady. "Allison, you deserve the truth even if it's hard." Her words echoed in my mind, a quiet permission to face what I feared. That night, I stayed up late, scrolling through Mark's emails when he left his laptop unattended. There, between work memos, I found it messages that didn't belong to me, plans for meetings that didn't include me, photos exchanged between him and a woman I didn't recognize. I felt my world tilt. The next days were a blur of anxiety and pain. Mark's excuses grew thinner, his lies more desperate. One evening, I caught him in a lie about where he'd been. "Why won't you just tell me the truth?" I asked, voice trembling. He looked away, silence heavy between us. In that moment, I realized the betrayal wasn't just about the affair. It was about the trust that had been shattered. The day I discovered the full truth is etched in my memory like a wound that won't quite heal. It was a rainy Saturday afternoon, the kind that makes the world feel smaller and colder. Mark had said he was going to a work conference, but something in his eyes didn't sit right with me. I decided to follow my instincts. I drove to the hotel where he was supposedly staying. When I saw him, hand in hand with a woman who wasn't me, laughing softly as if the weight of the world didn't exist, something inside me broke. I felt numb, but also alive in a strange, painful way. Later, I confronted him. The words came out in broken sobs. "How long?" I asked, voice barely a whisper. He didn't look at me. "Almost a year." I wanted to scream, to run, to disappear. Instead, I sat down, feeling the cold edge of reality settle around me. He told me about his loneliness, his mistakes, his regrets. But it wasn't enough to fix the pieces he'd shattered. The days after were filled with silence and heavy conversations. We talked about separation, about what our future could possibly look like. I felt like I was losing everything I'd worked so hard to build. But beneath the despair, a quiet voice inside me began to whisper. Maybe this was a chance, a painful chance to rebuild, but rebuild nonetheless. After that confrontation, I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, unsure whether to fall or climb back to safety. The days that followed were a blur of tears, anger, and confusion. But amidst the chaos, I knew I had to make a choice. To keep sinking into bitterness, or to start fighting for myself. I began by setting small boundaries. I stopped answering Mark's calls immediately, choosing when and how to respond. I poured my energy into my children, finding solace in their laughter and innocence. I also started journaling, writing down every feeling, every fear, every hope. It became my refuge. One evening, I reached out to a therapist. I needed someone to help me untangle the mess inside my heart. Therapy wasn't easy. Some sessions left me raw and exposed. But slowly, I began to understand the patterns, how I'd put others' needs before my own, how I'd ignored the quiet cries of my own soul. I also reconnected with old friends I'd drifted away from. Their support reminded me I wasn't alone. And when Mark asked to meet and talk about reconciliation, I listened, but I wasn't ready to forgive yet. I told him, I need to find myself first. And that was the most honest thing I could say. Because healing doesn't come from rushing back into what was. It comes from finding peace within. As the truth slowly unfolded, it wasn't just my private world that changed. The ripple effects touched everyone around me. At work, whispers followed me down the hallways. Subtle looks that spoke volumes. Some colleagues offered quiet support, while others kept their distance, unsure how to act around the woman whose marriage was falling apart. Friends took sides, some siding with Mark, others with me. Family gatherings became uncomfortable, full of forced smiles and awkward silences. My parents tried to protect me, but I could see the worry etched into their faces. Mark's reputation took a hit too. Clients at his firm began to question his focus. The confident man I married seemed to shrink under the weight of his mistakes. One evening, Mark's mother called me unexpectedly. Her voice was soft, tinged with regret. I'm sorry, Allison. I wish things had been different. Her words were a balm and a reminder that forgiveness isn't one-sided. It's a journey for everyone involved. Through it all, I learned the importance of standing tall amid judgment and gossip. I decided not to hide, not to be ashamed. Instead, I embraced my story, the good and the painful, because in sharing our truths, we find connection. And sometimes, healing begins there. With time, the sharp edges of pain softened, and a quiet strength took root inside me. I moved into a small apartment not far from my old home, a space filled with light, the scent of fresh linen, and the sound of birds outside my window. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I threw myself into my work, finding joy in the classroom once again. Emma and Noah became my anchors. Their innocent smiles reminded me daily of why I had to keep moving forward. I also began volunteering at a local community center, helping women who had faced struggles of their own. Sharing my story with them made me realize how far I'd come. Forgiveness became a daily practice, not a single moment. I forgave Mark not to erase the past, but to free myself from its hold. I forgave those who had hurt me, knowingly or unknowingly, because carrying anger only weighed me down. Most importantly, I forgave myself for the times I stayed silent, for the moments I doubted my worth. And in that forgiveness, I found peace. New opportunities blossomed, friendships deepened. My confidence grew, and the fear that once held me captive began to fade. I learned that healing isn't a destination. It's a journey, often winding and uncertain, but always worth taking. And as I stood on that path, I realized something profound. Choosing myself wasn't selfish. It was necessary. Thank you for listening to my story. I've shared with you the pain of betrayal, the struggle to forgive, and the quiet strength that grew from choosing myself. It wasn't an easy journey, no one's is. But sometimes, the hardest steps lead us to the most beautiful places. So I want to ask you this. Have you ever been faced with a choice between holding on to pain or letting go to find peace? What would you choose if you were in my shoes? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. And if my story touched your heart, consider subscribing and supporting this channel, because every voice deserves to be heard, and every story matters. Until next time, take care of yourself, and remember you are stronger than you know.